Financial maths, bonds. So a bond is a type of loan where the certificate is issued by a government or a public company promising to pay a certain amount at a fixed rate of interest at a specified time to the investor. The government company also repays the original value of the bond to the investor with the final payment. And we say that bonds are debt investments. So a debt investment is basically where we have an investor lending money to the firm or to the government, and it is expected then that the borrower will pay back the interest and the investment. So different types of debt-based investments would be things like your corporate bonds, your government bonds, annuities, and even saving accounts. So the main difference between a bond and a loan is that a bond is basically tradable, so you can buy a bond, and there's usually a market where you can trade the bonds, whereas loans tend to be agreements between a bank and a customer, and they're usually non-tradable. So in other words, the bank is obliged to see out the term of the loan. But the way in which we carry out our calculations is going to be exactly the same as our investments and our loans. So let's have a look at one or two types, and then I'll set you some questions. So if we go to page 254 and we look at question 21, we're given a sum of money, €6,000, is invested in an 8-year bond with an AER of 6%, and we have to find the value of the investment when it matures in 8 years' time. So again, we start by writing down, well, what's the amount? So our investment is 6,000. So in other words, we're paying 6,000 for a bond. We have our interest rate, our annual equivalent rate is 6%, so that's going to be 0.06 as a decimal. Our time is 8 years, and that's an AER, so therefore that's per annum. So in other words, our interest is matching our time, so we don't need to change that. And then we're looking for what is the amount of the investment in 8 years' time, so what is the value? So we start by using our formula F is equal to P by 1 plus I to the power of T, which is found on page 30 in our maths tables. So subbing in our values, we have 6,000 by 1 plus I to the power of T, which is 8. And therefore that means that the value has amounted to €9,563.09. So the second example we want to look at here is question 26 on page 254, where we're asked to calculate the AER offered on this bond. So we're trying to find the annual equivalent rate. In other words, what is the yearly rate on this bond? And that's because in this particular picture, we can see that we have to watch our savings grow online, given that there's a 4.5% 15-month fixed term rate. Okay, so our rate, 4.5%, is representing 15 months. So as always, if we're working out our rate, we're using our formula F is equal to P by 1 plus I to the power of T, where P in this case was the original amount, which is always going to be 100%, or 1. And F is the original amount plus the rate, which is 104.5%, or 1.045. So therefore our time is 15 months. So therefore we have to write that as a fraction of a year, which would be 15 over 12 in terms of years. So therefore if we're putting into our formula F is equal to P plus 1 plus I to the power of T, then we have 1.045 is equal to P, which is 1, by 1 plus I to the power of 15 over 12. So again, we're looking to get I on its own, which means I have to get rid of this power fraction. So this 15 over 12, which means I must get the root of both sides. So it's 15 over 12 root over 1.05, which is going to equal to 1 plus I. And therefore, if I take 1 away from both sides, then that gives me I is equal to, so 0.03584. And therefore, if I write that as a rate, then the rate is going to be our annual equivalent rate. So multiply by 100. If I multiply by 100, I end up with 3.584%. Okay, so let's have a look at some questions then. So I'm going to get you to do question 22, and then good practice for your AUR, so I'll give you 23 and 25.